Hello.
Welcome back.
I'm Nicole.
And I'm Megan.
And this is the Synchronicity Podcast, where we change your brain to change your life.
That was a...
Yeah, I couldn't remember the words for a second, so I had to exhale to be like, hey, this is what's happening.
Wow. Anyway, we use science-based information about the brain and about life, essentially like hormones and things, to be able to change every aspect of your life for the most part. There's really not a piece of you that won't change if you end up working with us or even really listening to us. We challenge most of society's what we now call normal. But we are very grateful that you're here. If you're returning, thank you for coming back. If you're new, welcome. Yeah, we promise if you continue to listen that your life will not be the same once you leave here.
Definitely not.
So anyway, today we're going to talk about anger versus sadness. Excuse me.
Megan's not dying.
I'm fighting, I don't even know. It's like the weirdest illness I've ever had, but...
And it's not even like an illness.
I don't know, it's like a weird cough. But anyway, it's like, oh, you just can't sleep at night. So, what we're talking about is the fact that masculines go to, right? Like their testosterone and anger go hand in hand, okay? So when a man gets upset, naturally it's anger. Now, I'm not condoning a man getting super angry or anything or saying that's correct. He needs to know how to manage his anger,
or
right?
hitting anyone out of anger, anything.
Yeah, but it is natural for a man to get angry when he feels upset, okay? Anger is their go-to. Women's main go-to is sadness. So we've talked about ego dystonia before, or being ego dystonic. We have a podcast about it. If you don't know, go listen to that because that goes into detail. But a great way to know if you are ego dystonic is that the majority of women nowadays are really angry. That's masculine.
So angry.
Right? It used to be normal for women to get upset and cry. Now we get upset and start screaming. That's masculine. Okay? And for men, right, it used to be normal for them to get upset and start, your boss start yelling at you or something. Not saying that that's okay, but that's what would happen as masculines. They start to raise their voice and they start to get angry. That's testosterone, okay? But now we have all these men that just are in their feelings and everything's about their feelings. I actually had a guy making comments online about his feelings. And I was like, it's so funny how men lead with their feelings, which when you upset them, they just start crying, which is feminine. And I'm like, I
reject all of this.
It's just weird.
I don't know.
It's so weird.
It's really hard to watch a man cry.
We live somewhere between Idiocracy and the Twilight Zone, I feel like. So, men out there that just start crying randomly, you are in your feminine. Women that get angry very quickly, you are in your masculine and you're acting like a man. So if your default mode is to be angry as a woman, you have a masculine shield. If your default mode is to be sad as a man and you're depressed and you lose a lot of drugs or do whatever, you have wuss syndrome. You have not, both need to cultivate opposite, right? So women, if you're angry, you need to cultivate your femininity where you have a positive release about feelings, right? Or not positive, but just a release for your feelings, an outlet for feelings because you're rejecting your feelings and then you're getting angry about it. And you're projecting that onto the world. Men, you need to cultivate your masculinity. I don't know whether you need to go punch something, cut down a tree. I don't really know.
Chop some wood.
Whatever men do.
Slap your balls, sign your balls.
Go get rejected by some
things.
women. Go ask, become a man. You have not gone through Fisher King Woo. And then, next podcast is going to talk a lot deeper what the impact of that is to an extreme. But, the majority of the men in today's world are wusses. And the majority of women in today's... I'm bashing both, so no one can be hateful towards this. I mean, you might try to, but...
be hateful all you want. You're just triggered.
I'm also not shaming.
No.
Okay, I used to be super quick to anger, and I had a masculine shield. I was being a man.
Yes.
Super feminine woman, and yet I acted like a man, and I would get angry at men if they did not behave the way that I thought was the way that men should behave, which was actually forcing them into their feminine. Shocking. But anyway, it's just like something that we need to look at, because we're actually having an entire discussion this morning over our coffee when we get up in the morning and we talk about, what we need to do that day at work. We talked a lot about this, and mental illness actually comes from, my opinion is what happens is that men, they reject their anger because they're told that that's toxically masculine, instead of telling them how to properly deal with it or giving them tools to properly deal with it, right? And then they go into sadness because they think that sadness is more acceptable, but we reject them for that too. So they go back into anger. But when you put anger and sadness into the perfect storm, that's when you get a violent person. And that's why you get suicide, rape, and everything. And again, we'll talk more about this in the next podcast, but of just the extremes of that. But it's really important to understand that mental illness, why it's on a rise in our culture, is because we're not just teetering back and forth from anger to sadness. We're coming full circle where we're putting broken feminine, or wounded masculine, wounded feminine, combining them and creating like the perfect storm of it's everybody else's fault. There's violent outbursts. There's, rape, suicide. You need to be physically put on some sort of medication to control your feelings. And here's the thing, people. When you reject somebody's feelings, or even if you don't allow yourself to feel your feelings, you're damaging either the other person or yourself by not allowing yourself or the other person to feel. Feelings are just feelings. They're not facts. And when we just make space for them, and we go, okay, well, I'm having a feeling. Like, I'm upset, I'm this, I'm that. Now, what do I want to do about it? We ask a question. We don't just react to whatever we're feeling. We live in a reactive culture that just goes, oh, you're having a feeling? React. It's everybody else's fault. We don't self-regulate, and we're not taught to. And it's creating, in my opinion, a shitstorm. And I don't even think it's my opinion at this point. We're seeing it firsthand. We could study this and make a scientific paper if you wanted to. But shit's crazy.
Well, and the thing is that this is what we're seeing, and this is one reason why it got brought up. Men are getting together, holding hands, and crying. Okay. There's a lot of things wrong with that from a masculine perspective. One, you're probably a bunch of beta males. Or two, you've been so emasculated and mothered by feminine that all you know is your feelings.
Yeah,
you have
100% beta.
Completely stepped out of anger. You've completely stepped out of testosterone. You might as well not have a ball sack anymore at this point.
Well, okay.
Not to emasculate you verbally, but Megan's gonna disclaimer this now.
No, not disclaimer.
You did the okay, hold on.
Well, because I was just laughing. I love when you go Scorpio and you're just like, you don't have a ball sack anymore.
I'm like, okay, I can't, when I think of a whole bunch of men. Okay, so the reason I said that was because right now you hear men say oh, well, she's got his balls on a keychain.
I mean, it's true.
Yes, you no
true.
longer have a ball sack. If you are sitting around...
Well, you have a ball sack. It's just owned by your masculine girlfriend or wife.
Yeah, someone emasculated you, and if you're fucking sitting there, excuse my language, holding hands with another man and crying over your feelings, wow.
Okay.
That is sadness. And... that
really, it's sadness.
It's sadness. You're a woman. You might I'm baffled.
Okay.
Now, on the flip side, we're seeing this is what is happening in society right now. That's why I'm using these analogies and I'm being so vile, because I'm this is what's happening. Women are going to these events and they're beating the shit out of a pillow, violently taking it out on them. Or what movie was that where they were teaching, oh my gosh, there was a guy in that big sumo suit, and they were teaching him how to beat him up. Oh, I can't remember what movie that is. I don't know. I'll reference it in the show notes. I can see it in my head, but I can't remember what movie it is. But if women are getting together to scream and be angry, you're a bunch of men, and you might as well have a strap-on dick, because that's what's happening. Right? Because masculine, angry, and the feminine, sadness, sadness in the sadness in the masculine, it's flip-flopped. And we're literally seeing like these groups, like people are going to retreats to do this.
Right. So they're
like promoting this.
Well, they're promoting it because what they're trying to do is process the masculine wound or process the feminine wound.
But it's flip-flopped.
In order to correct. You are correct. I mean, I am not correcting you. I am just saying what they're doing is processing the wound. So I get why there's retreats. It makes more sense, in my opinion, for women to be like
angry,
punching a pillow. I've actually done this. So
yeah,
that's also why I was sitting here giggling. Is that like I have totally like in like Kundalini teacher training and stuff. Like we were beating up pillows.
But were you actually angry, or were you like moving energy?
You know the funniest thing is I was like, I don't feel angry enough to punch a pillow.
Yeah.
Like, I don't.
Okay, so you were moving energy per se.
Usually you're going to end up crying anyway because you're going to move through anger into sadness.
Okay, so that's going back into the feminine. You're going from the masculine, flipping yourself back right.
So if it's done correctly.
Yes. But how is men crying putting them back in their masculine?
So...
is it?
No, because that's not Fisher King Wu. I also understand. Here's the other thing that we all have to understand. Men and women are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And a woman processes trauma and moves through trauma easier than a male brain. So us flipping back and forth between our masculine and feminine is a lot easier than a man. So us processing by, even sadness can be expressed by yelling.
Yes.
So it depends on if she's yelling in sadness because, it's like when you experience loss, when that like hits you, it's like that guttural, like, ugh, like, so to express pain or, to like throw a pillow or to process in the physical plane what's going on in the emotional plane kind of makes sense to me. And depending on the energy frequency, I totally get what you're saying, but it's like, it can be very masculine. But with men, like, sitting around crying, I think we're just encouraging wuss syndrome. And again, it would depend on each of the retreats and, like, what they're doing. And I would have to, like, kind of be there and process, like, what's going on. This is why we promote plant medicine versus these kinds of things, because it's so complex that it's way easier for Grandma Aya or somebody to work out your specific complexity of like what's going on.
Yeah.
Than it is for some person to go say like, oh, we need to go like scream, yell, or
beat a pillow.
And the thing with the men thing that I will say that I have a problem with is that, and where you're absolutely correct, is that the feminine can get together, hug, scream, cry, whatever, process as a community. Men getting together and having men comforting other men as they're crying is completely unnatural. That is weird. Men get together to compete, control, conquer, not to get together and cry, and that is extremely feminine. You're encouraging the femininity of a man, and yes, men have feminine souls.
Yes.
So I am not bashing that, but it's when men need to process their sadness, they create from it. And yes, they may cry by themselves or with the feminine, but men crying in front of other men is where that is strange to me. When men process feelings, it's in solitude or with a woman that is a safe space to them. Men crying in front of other men is correct. They're all betas because no alpha archetype man would ever be crying in another man's arms. That's beta. That's complete.
That makes me feel so weird.
Yeah, it's when I think about it just on like an energetic psychological frequency, men having feelings and everything is totally normal. Do not think that we are bashing that. It's just how they process feelings is not with other men.
Well, it's more like the man cave, going back to the man cave and solitude and ruminating and alone time versus being all together, like holding hands, singing songs.
Yeah.
That's very feminine when you think about it.
Men usually don't cry in front of other men until after they go through andropause. And then their estrogen turns on because their testosterone is plummeting. But testosterone, remember that they want to give, protect, and cherish. If they're crying, then they can't protect. So they're totally against their own energy frequency. And in front of other men, that's actually extraordinarily dangerous because then they're up for an alpha to challenge them. And then they're not the main alpha of the group anymore because crying would be a weakness, like sadness used to be considered a weakness in men. That's why men get angry and not sad. True alphas get angry because sadness is feminine. It's weakness. It's vulnerability.
Well, even if you see little boys at the peak testosterone, what is it at like 6?
They have several spurts.
Yeah. So like at the first main heavy peak, I think it's like between 6 and 8 or younger than that. There's actual their little boys are like angry. Like they will throw temper tantrums and like they're angry. And if you like look at kids before we break them, little girls get sad, like they'll cry, and little boys will get angry and like they'll turn bright red and like throw themselves on the floor. Like that's actually masculine and feminine in children because it's before they have really been like broken by society and like trauma has truly imprinted on them.
Yeah, no, that's completely a thing. Just like baby girls, like more eye contact and more snuggles, and little boys are like feral little creatures. So usually men will process like going for a hike, going for a walk, being in solitude. Like they'll go out, process their feelings by themselves. Like men feel things.
Yeah.
But it's just like how they're processing. So these man retreats that are like, let's wear mala beads and cry I've seen these, like cry in a circle in water. It's just like really strange. They're looking for their mommies, essentially.
It's bizarre.
Again, I understand that men have feminine trauma and they have trauma with their mommies and all sorts of stuff. We are not shaming that by any means. It's just like understand that the masculine and the feminine process things differently, and how men process sadness is not going to be crying and holding each other. Again, if it's with a woman, totally different. But men comforting men is strange. Women comforting women is not strange at all. Men don't seek EQ, right, with other men. EQ is higher in women for a reason. So men, and this is why it's really important to have intimate relationships, especially for men. They die young when they don't have them, is because of this. Men process their feelings with their feminine.
Right.
And so what these men are actually missing is proper femininity in their lives or significant other that is a safe space for them to process emotions and things, because a lot of men's emotions are also expressed through sex. So their outlet for processing feelings is sexual. They say that like women have sex to express how they feel and men need sex in order to know how they feel. And so sex really does connect men into their oxytocin and into their feelings and things like that. So, this is why partnerships are super, super important, is because now, in the absence of positive relationships in people's lives, we're having retreats and things that are basically surrogates for that. And, women getting angry, like she probably doesn't feel protected. She is mad at the masculine. There's not strong masculinity in her life where she can sit down and cry and he will hold her. And sadness not expressed turns to anger. Anger not expressed turns to sadness. We have to know these things and start to understand that these are symptoms of a huge wound in our society. And where I'm glad that people are finding places to express these things, but I would love to actually talk to a man that has been to one of those retreats, and like really get his perspective on what all took place there, so I could have a more like conscious understanding, because I've only ever seen like photos of it. Like I said, I've kind of experienced like punching pillows and things like that, and I was kind of just like, I don't know, like we had blindfolds on and everything, but it just felt really weird.
That is weird.
Now, again, if you would have
moving energy,
if you would have taken me like 6 years ago to one of those, I probably had a lot of anger that I needed to express, and I probably would have been like, maybe my anger would have transmuted into sadness, and I would have been able to start crying or processing. So, again, I understand the functionality of it, but just really interesting.
Men holding men and crying is very fascinating to me, and that's why we did this podcast.
But also, like, women holding men's balls is strange, too.
Yeah, step into your femininity, give him his balls back, let him lead. Yeah. That's all I got to say on that. Anything else we didn't cover on this topic?
No.
All right.
You know the drill if you've been here before.
YouTube, Apple,
Apple,
Spotify.
Do your thing.
Do your thing.
We'll
Let us know if you need us. Bye.